Today, more than half of the population of the Earth lives in cities, and cities are increasingly unequal places. Cities are more chaotic, they have been built in more unequal and sometimes very spontaneous ways. Over the last few decades, even in the global north or in the west, we have experienced rising inequalities. The idea behind the project was that often academics don't talk to communities, or if they do it in a very hierarchical way, so that communities are more researched on than researched with. This project is all about trying to understand how co-creation can work, what are its potentials, how to engage with people, how to create more equal relationships between communities, artists and researchers, and how to get more viewpoints and more perspectives on board to understand the city better.
So the idea with co-creation is that artists and activists and researchers come together to do some sort of creative work that is both inspiring, motivational, but also politically motivated, right? That it's challenging some ideas we have about what kinds of people live in certain areas. Rio de Janeiro is kind of a fascinating place. It's a beautiful and scary and wonderful place all in one. Our goal was to partner with a local institution, which is lovingly PUCI, which is the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro. They suggested one place for us to go work, Favela Santa Marta, and they helped facilitate the interaction between the research team at Bath and the local residents of Santa Marta, notably one NGO called Grupo Eco, who is spearheaded by Itamar Silva, who is an activist, a journalist, and a kind of community organizer, community leader. There were two basic projects. One was about mapping mobility in the favela, so we created a community map populated with photography and people. So researchers went around with residents to talk about the spaces of Santa Marta, to locate spaces of opportunity, spaces of kind of despair, spaces of problems, spaces of challenges, and also outside of the favela, where residents go, where they travel, where they feel safe, where they feel unwelcomed, and things like that. The second project was about art and activism with graffiti artists. So we met several graffiti artists and brought with us one graffiti artist who then graffitied together, and they got inspiration from researchers, from participants, from community members, from the residents of Santa Marta about the kinds of graffiti that we would create, representing different dimensions about what the favela is, how that feeds into ideas of stigmatization.
My involvement in the project was working mainly with local graffiti artists and street artists, and we devised a project to create pieces of art based on working with the community there, collecting words and phrases about how the community felt. A lot of views of the favela and things like that are quite negative, but when you speak to the community, a lot of the phrases and words they were using were very positive, so it was really an interesting collaboration.
Mexico City has 16 municipalities, and the one that is the most disadvantaged, the most populated, is Iztapalapa. It's also one of the municipalities or the one with the highest crime rate. And so we decided that we wanted to work with them. They are also, of course, one of the municipalities with the worst stigma. Because most of the people who worked in the Mexican part of the project are from the Department of Education, we decided that we wanted to focus on schools. We wanted to have an art intervention in schools. Next thing was to look for the partners. We already had UNAM, which is the National University in Mexico, but we needed some more. So we approached first the Ministry of Culture in Mexico City, a program that is called Alas y Raíces, or Wings and Roots. And this program of the government is in charge of taking cultural activities to disadvantaged areas in the city. So they were the the perfect partner. And then we needed artists, so we approached different people, but we ended up working with a collective of poets that is called Poesía y Trayecto, Poetry and Journey, and also graffiti artists. So once we had that, we looked for the schools who wanted to participate. So once we had all the actors together, we just co-created an intervention.
I was really moved by how much the activities impacted on the young people, and in particular the poetry workshops. When the students were writing their individual poems, they touched on some very, very personal topics, including things like family abandonment, sexual harassment. So obviously these are really painful things to listen to, but I was really moved that, well, firstly that the poets had been able to create such a intimate and supportive atmosphere that they felt able to share those things, but also by their bravery in doing so.
We also collected information, a survey and interviews before and after the intervention. Preliminary results suggest that there are some positive impacts on school climate, students' self-confidence, academic self-confidence, and the perception of the marginalization of the neighborhood.
We learned, a great deal. One, about the informality of doing creative projects, is really able to bring people into projects that I think traditional methods are unable to do in a way. We learned about the life that residents live while they're in Santa Marta, many of the challenges they face, but also very much some inspirational things as well. Residents go on to do wonderful things like become lawyers or activists, and they come back to Santa Marta to help the rest of the community. So in that sense, it's quite inspiring and thriving.
And now the next stage is to for every team to develop their own local case study. So we would like to get involved more with communities in Bath. So we are also using this exhibition to explain people in the city what we are trying to do, and find people who would be interested to participate. And we would like to get them on board, especially museums, schools, people who work with health, education, because there is a big potential for them in this project.
My hope is that is twofold. First is that favela residents recognize that the stigma is something that can be challenged and can be overcome in some instances. That's not a short-term solution. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a long period of time. The second one is challenging the very perception of the favela. That occurs in informal ways, but it also occurs through politicians and policy. So linking up the creative practices with the people who make decisions about urban life is the hope.
I really hope that by the end of this project, co-creation will be a methodology that we can recommend, and we can somehow document how to transfer it from one context to another, and how it can be really used for the communities and for the public good, and they can act fully as the motors of the engines of positive change in communities.